1. Emily. I knew this name for my entire life up to now. 15 years old. She babysat me and my little brother since we were very young. She was at our summer camp and I saw her around. Everything I say in this story, 100% without a doubt happened to me. I've seen old pictures of her when she was 10 and when she was 17, but they were incredibly inconsistent. When she babysat me and my brother, she was 10. When she went to camp with us, she was 12. We went to summer camp 2 years ago. And a knee billboard just went up in our small town. It says, "Remember, don't be like Emily, and don't drink and drive." With a picture of someone who has to be at least 17 with blonde hair, blue eyes, and a striking resemblance to someone I used to know. Emily. They were the same person. I saw pictures of her when she was 12, taken in 2016. Pictures of her when she was 17, taken in 2005. The resemblance these Emilys shared was undeniable. It couldn't have been different people. They are and were the same person. I asked around yesterday if anyone had ever heard of this girl. Old summer camp teachers went through old records and found nothing. None of my high school friends even recognize her, let alone the name. I believe Emily is not a person. Emily is a thing that wanted me to do something with, but left, and left fast, with the only memory of her being the billboard reading, "Remember, don't be like Emily and don't drink and drive." 2. This happened almost exactly a year ago, July 2016. I just looked it up in my Facebook Messenger app. One random night, I had a very, very vivid and emotional dream about an ex of mine. Like most people, I've had several exes over the course of my life, but this one I had been with for 6 years. He was my most serious ex-boyfriend, but ultimately things didn't work out. I'm happily married now and a mother. Anyway, this dream had taken me to a place where my ex was. I met him and had a conversation with him. In my dream, I wasn't married or a mother. I was simply a single girl. I don't remember the details about it, but it left all the emotional aftertaste inside me when I awoke. It was powerful. It didn't make me miss him in such a way as to want to ever be together, as I'm with a man whom I absolutely love now. And even if I were single, I know that relationship would never work out. But rather, it made me concerned about my ex in a way that I just wanted him to be happy. That dream had me thinking of him the entire day after. Well, at some point I had tried to call my mom's cell phone. She didn't answer, and it must have been semi-important to me to get in touch. I can't remember why now. So I tried my parents' landline. Yep, they still have one of those. Still no answer. Later on, my mom ended up calling me back and sounded spooked. She said she has something to show me when I come over. My parents live near me, and I visit often now with my son so they can enjoy their grandchild. So I drove on over and my mom took me to their landline telephone, which has caller ID on it. It showed my ex's full name, and that he had called at the very time I had earlier. What's also weird is, it wasn't his number. He lives in a different state, so different area code. It was actually my cell phone number. So it got the number correct on the caller ID, but the name was obviously not mine. My mom said she didn't pick up because she didn't understand why my ex would be calling them, and she wanted me to listen to the voice message first if he would have left one. She never even took notice of the number and how it belonged to me. Utterly confused, I decided to write my ex on Facebook Messenger. I needed to know. Being that we ended things somewhat mutually and respectfully, he luckily got back to me fairly quickly and told me that no, he didn't try calling my parents. He doesn't even know their home phone number. He was just as weirded out as we all seemed to be. What's extra strange too is that my ex and I never shared any phone plans. We always had separate phones and contacts. When I moved to the state my parents lived in, I even got myself a new phone and a new phone number. So there's absolutely no way that my phone and my ex's phone could be linked whatsoever. My mind was just blown, it still is. I don't know what happened that day, but I had this strong feeling that me just having had that powerful dream somehow summoned my ex into my experience that day, and manifested itself like that. I could be wrong. My dream may not have played a role in it at all. But how strange is it that just when I dreamt of him and was thinking of him, that this should happen? 3. Last Sunday, my boyfriend and I decided to get brunch and shop for some new clothing at a mall by our house. However, all day I could not catch a break. I called it predestined because I felt like no matter what decisions I made throughout the day, the universe was out to get me. Since I'm lazy, I'm just going to list the unusual things that happened all day. Number 1. We pulled into what appeared to be an empty parking spot at the shopping center. However, I heard a dragging sound about a quarter into the spot and got out of my car to see I had drove over a cone. Neither my boyfriend nor I had seen the cone ahead of time. But we didn't feel like it was that unusual. Number 2. As I was walking to the shopping center from the parking lot, the strap on my sandal snapped. Number 3. When crossing the street, I made sure not to start walking until I saw the walking man sign. I checked both ways beforehand, but once I proceeded to step off the curb, I looked up to see the red hand. Number 4. At brunch, my boyfriend and I were sitting across from each other talking. And this one freaked me out the most. This incident was what made me piece together the others. I had my phone on the table next to me, and was very cautious not to keep it too close to the edge because I had just bought it and was worried about it falling and cracking. As I was listening to my boyfriend talk, I saw my phone fly off the table and onto the ground a few feet away, as if someone had forcibly pushed it. My boyfriend even stopped his train of thought to acknowledge it. His response was, "Whoa, that was weird." I checked to see if my phone was on vibrate, but it wasn't, and I hadn't even received any notifications. Number 5. After this, our food arrived. For some reason, I had the most difficult time eating. I ordered a small brunch sandwich, which should not have been anything too complicated to eat. However, every time I picked up my sandwich to eat it, pieces of food fell out of it and all over my clothes, every time. Eventually I gave up and started trying to eat it with a fork. But at one point I set the fork down and it slid off the plate, off the table, and landed on the floor. I thought for sure there was something wrong with the table, but we checked it and it wasn't wobbly at all. Number 6. As we were leaving the restaurant, we were trying to politely squeeze through a crowd that had gathered at the entrance. Although I had my head down and was shouldering my way through, I managed to step on a lady's foot. She yelled in pain and loudly accused me in front of everyone. I apologized, and we left. Number 7. While shopping for clothes, I had found a few items I really liked. Since I'm pretty money conscious, I made sure to check the prices before trying them on, so that I wouldn't fall in love with something I couldn't afford. Every item I had checked and brought into the fitting room was a different price coming out of the fitting room than I had seen going into the fitting room. So far, those are only a few of the things I can remember that happened. I know other little incidents happened, but I can't recall all of them. As a side note, I do smoke weed and drink on occasion, but I hadn't smoked or drank directly prior to these incidents. If anyone has any ideas of what they think was going on besides just having a bad day, since it was so much stranger than that, I would really love to hear what people's theories are. 4. This was the most disturbing thing that happened to me around 2 years ago, 2015. It was late. I had just gotten into bed and was worrying I was not going to be able to fall asleep, as I was not tired at all. I was pondering about life and thinking about those silly thoughts that come into mind when you can't sleep, when suddenly I heard my noisy as hell bedroom door being slightly opened. I turned my head towards it, and I saw the open gap in the doorway, enough to let a head go through it, and the blackness of the unlit next room in the little opening. Then someone poked his head inside my room. I could make out, with the glow of the lights coming through the window, the silhouette of my brother's head. It was clearly him, with his kind of long and messy hair and unshaved face. He was silently staring at me, kind of smiling. After a few seconds I sat up a little and gestured him to tell me what he wanted, but no response came. I then asked him what. Nothing. He just stared at me blankly, motionless. I thought nothing really of it. I knew him. He sometimes could be weird. Do these kind of things to me, to make me curious of what does he want. I got tired of his silliness and turned on my bedside lamp. But when the light filled the room in an instant, the door turned out to be closed and no one was there. I just sat there in shock, tense, listening for a moment in the next room. Nothing. I wasn't crazy or dreaming. My brother opened the door and poked his head inside. Or someone just like him. I know it wasn't a hallucination. I wasn't sleepy at all. The door couldn't have been closed silently this fast. It was impossible. I turned the lights back off and covered myself with my almighty blanket to protect me from all evil, and noped myself to sleep. The next morning I asked my brother the story and was really surprised. He told me he didn't go pay me a visit the night before, and I could see his sincerity in his eyes. I truly believed him. I'm not scared by anything ghostly. Every apparition that has ever happened to me I shrugged off, as a simple trick of the eyes or the mind. But this was no trickery. This was so clear even with only the glow of the window lights. To this day I have no idea what happened that night in my room. I know I wasn't asleep. That was no dream. I had just gotten into bed only minutes past. I was too awake. Someone paid me a visit. Perhaps one of those so-called bedroom visitors. Who knows? 5. I've been torn for a long time over posting this. I've been researching what has been happening to me for a while now, and I feel like I need to talk about it. I'm not sure if it should go in paranormal or here, but this situation feels more glitch to me than anything. Also, I've changed some places and a couple of identifying details just to keep my privacy intact. There are 2 parts to this, first dreams and then another me. Part 1. I have always had very prophetic dreams. Not a lot. I am in my early 40s and I have had 19 to date that I remember. Some are heavy and scary, and some are happy, most are mundane, but they always have a connection to my life or affect me directly. 3 are events that you will all probably recognize. These dreams are extremely vivid and realistic. Every sense is aware. If you've ever been pregnant, think of the dreams you had then and magnify them by 10. I cannot make these dreams happen. I cannot control them. I don't have any psychic powers. I can't change what happens in the dream. They feel real, but at the same time, they feel forbidden, like I shouldn't be seeing or knowing what I am. In fact, I have had 2 dreams that freak me out the most, and I'm not even sure if they were just nightmares or part of this. I cannot move, sleep paralysis, and there is a spinning blue light, and a voice almost computerized saying my name, then a string of numbers and colors, and then reset, reset, reset. When I wake up, I feel amazing, almost euphoric, but also sort of hazy. Like I should remember something, or I need to do something. Also, anytime I wake up from one of these dreams, I get a flash of that blue spinning light, almost like an echo in my brain. Sometimes for a split second, sometimes for a few minutes. Anyway, sorry this is long, but I want to give you all the information I can. When I was 8, I woke up crying and my heart was pounding. I had just had a nightmare about my godbrother getting in a terrible motorcycle accident. He was arguing with someone, got on his bike without a helmet, was speeding and didn't make a turn, and so he hit a guardrail, spun, and then slipped down an embankment. I could see his face and injuries, and he took 9 breaths. Then I woke up. My parents were in the living room and I ran in there sobbing. The phone rang and my dad said, "Who's calling this fucking late?" and went to the kitchen to answer it. I looked at my mom and said, "Tommy's dead." She said, "No, honey, calm down. You just had a nightmare." I told her he was arguing with Uncle John and he sped off on his bike. In the dream, I didn't see who he was arguing with, but once I woke up, I just knew. Just then, my dad was saying, no, how, what? All the exclamations people make with bad news. My mom looked at me panicked, then went into the kitchen. She came back very pale. I just said, "Uncle John will never be the same." And he wasn't. He spent the next decade drinking himself to death. A few days after the funeral, my mom talked with me about it. She said there were a couple of times when I was little where I had told her things I should have no knowledge of, like when our cat got out and was missing for a week. I told her Fritz would be at the back door after breakfast. Sure enough, he was. A dream I had when I was 14, summertime, typical teenager, napping in the afternoon. I was driving a pickup truck and I was distracted, very worried. I could feel a pit of despair gnawing in my stomach and kind of a cold dread on my skin. I was trying to get somewhere quickly and was angry when I got caught at a railroad crossing. In the town I grew up, people used to say if you got caught by a train, you'd better pack a lunch because the delay was very long. I started pounding on the steering wheel, and then the horn. Then I pulled into the opposite lane and went through the crossing rails. The train blares its horn. I turn my head and scream. Then a jumble of steel and pain, and the most intense fear and adrenaline I have ever felt. Then a very clear, overwhelming thought of a little boy, a toddler, and I was just filled with love and peace. When I woke up, I was completely sweaty and nauseous. I ran to the bathroom and started throwing up. My mom came in to check on me. This is when we started hearing sirens. I told my mom that someone tried to beat the train. She looked at me confused for a second, then it dawned on her. She asked if it was someone we knew, and I said I didn't think so. A few days later, I found out that I did know the man. He was a teacher at the elementary school I had gone to. He was rushing to the hospital because what he and his wife thought was a persistent flu, and a case of the mumps was cancer. Their son was being admitted to a children's hospital. Okay, so I know this is getting very long, and it's going to be a bit longer. Here are the 3 dreams that you'll likely all recognize. Well, one of them for sure. So I was born at a military base in California. When I was 3, my dad retired and we moved back to our home state of Texas. I returned to California to go to college. One of my friends had a hardcore crush on this guy. One night our friend groups got together and I met him. I was hit with this overwhelming feeling that he would die, and soon. It was so strange he almost looked a little pixelated around the edges for a brief flash. I had never had a waking feeling like this. It made me woozy. I had no idea what to do. What could I say? "Hey man, you should see a doctor." That wouldn't be spooky and weird at all, right? My friend and this guy casually dated for a couple of weeks, and they realized they had nothing in common. So much for her crush. However, months after meeting him, I had this dream. I'm in the middle of a dark residential street, and it was so completely still it felt as if I was the only living being on the planet, which filled me with dread. Then I felt a dog nudge my hand, and I was so happy not to be alone. I knelt down to hug him, and this small river of blood trickles past. The dog gave this quiet yet bone-melting whine and backed away from me until I felt that I was completely alone again. I cannot stress to you enough how it felt like nothing was alive in the entire universe. The blood kept flowing down this pathway, and as much as I didn't want to, I went to see where it was coming from. A woman was in the fetal position at the bottom of some stairs. Off to the side, a man in jeans and white shoes splattered with blood. I looked up and could see a big, imposing figure. I couldn't make out any features. It was almost like he was a paper doll made from black construction paper. He was holding a knife. To his right and a bit behind him, another paper doll, shorter, holding a satchel. This figure turned its head and vomited. Then all the voices surrounded me, thousands all arguing. And then I woke up. It was around 2 a.m. and I knew that guy Ron, my friend dated, was dead. But what the fuck? That was the weirdest dream yet. Of course, in the next few days, we were looking at the trial of the century. I sometimes wonder if the fact that I attended the same university as O.J. Simpson contributed to my having the dream. Because I only met Ron one time, and saw him in passing once when he was picking up my friend. Which again, I had the overwhelming feeling he was going to die. Next dream, it is 1995 and I am about to graduate. I had a very late night, and was likely going to sleep all day. Instead, I have this dream where I am in what feels like a box, and I can't breathe because dust and rocks and chunks of debris are falling around me. I could feel it in my eyes and mouth, and it was a nasty, claustrophobic feeling. Then I wake up. Super quick dream, very unsettling. Look at the clock, it's a few minutes after 7. I have nothing to go on, the dream was so vague. I'm exhausted, and I go back to sleep. Few hours later, and I'm overwhelmed by the image of my cousin Gary. Cannot get him out of my head. Can practically smell him in the room. I call my aunt, hoping to casually ask how her son is. She immediately asks me if I've seen the news. I feel a cold dread and I'm trying to flip on the TV while asking her what happened. She said that building in Oklahoma, just terrible. So many people dead. Oklahoma. Gary is stationed in Hawaii. But I have family in Oklahoma. My grandmother was born in Oklahoma. Anyway, can't shake Gary's connection. But realize I was dreaming about being in the building. It wasn't until I saw Timothy McVeigh that I figured out the connection. Gary could be McVeigh's twin. Last one. Married, living in Texas. Have a 10-month-old son. He had been teething and we had had a long night. I'm trying to nap with him. Weirdest and most vivid dream ever. Nighttime in the desert. There is this goat walking towards me. He is only slightly illuminated. This goat feels completely evil and I am just mesmerized by it. And terrified. I hear a metallic whine and a rumble, and then off in the distance, a huge explosion lights up this desert as if something smashed into the ground. Goat is still walking towards me, and I see that he is being followed by these men in suits. I can't really make them out. I am so scared and I want to run, but I can't. Another whine and rumble followed by a fireball and explosion. The goat is kind of changing now, morphing a bit. Another explosion. I can see the goat and man a bit better, and the goat looks like he is walking on 2 legs, like he is becoming human. I am so scared in the dream that I wet myself. I look down and see the urine on this hard desert floor. Then I look up at the next explosion. The goat is inches from my face, and he is a man. I realize that the men in suits have made a circle around us. I start screaming and I feel like I am drowning in molten metal and suffocating in ozone. I wake up screaming and my son is screaming, and I had in fact peed myself. This was the most unsettling dream ever. I am crying, trying to settle my son, trying to find my husband, and trying to clean myself up. I have the worst case of dread ever. Find a note that my husband went to get me supplies. He comes home with bagels and coffee and flowers because he is amazing. He went out and did all that before he had to head to work. I hug him and he asks if I am okay, and I just nod and say I love him and thank him for the supplies. I flip the TV on in the kitchen while we fix our bagels up, and we see the second plane hit the tower. I had no connection to anyone in New York or DC or Pennsylvania. I sometimes feel that because all of us lived such a horrible few days together, that it was just all of our connection to each other, and to what happened and what was to come. My brother and 5 of my cousins all served multiple tours, but I don't think that's why I had the dream. And of course, the morphing man was Osama bin Laden. I have no idea who the men in suits were, but I could go all tinfoil hat and say they might have been our government. I couldn't say for sure, though. I want to stress that I don't have these dreams often, and the majority are actually good. I dreamed of my husband 3 days before I met him. In the dream, I saw our first home, the opening of the business my husband had dreamed of owning since he was a child. Speaking of children, I knew we would have 4, 2 boys and 2 girls, because I saw them all. 3 days before I even met their father. When my brother received a prestigious military honor, I knew before he did. The day my great aunt won big at a casino, I already knew about it. I have normal everyday dreams too, just like everyone else. On a side note, I don't believe in psychics, as strange as that sounds, even though what I am experiencing could be called psychic phenomena. I do believe there is something screwy going on in this world, as if things are topsy-turvy and spinning a bit too quickly. In what most would find to be a very boring typical American life, I am your average Texas football mom. My life revolves around my husband and children. I am that mom who heads all the committees and volunteers for everything. We are that house where all the kids hang out and hosts all the holiday parties. We are moderate politically, non-denominational born-agains. My husband hunts and fishes, I garden and homekeep. I post on subs about canning and knitting and backyard chickens. It's very American dream, and it is the exact life I have always wanted to live. I wouldn't change it for the world. Yet, every so often I get a déjà vu about a different life. I have dreams about a different person, me but not me. Given that these dreams feel just like my prophetic ones, I feel like she, or me, must exist and be living this life somewhere, right? Part 2. So like I said, I was born in California but live in Texas. I think the other me grew up in California and still lives there. She seems very artsy and cool. When I've seen her in a mirror or looking down at her, it's always from her perspective in the dreams. She seems to dress in all black. Picture a grown-up corporate goth. I think she is an artist, which makes sense. I am a very artistic person. She lives in a very nice retro LA-style apartment, or bungalow. She was married and has a son. He looks almost exactly like my youngest son. He is her world, and she is very involved in his life, just as I am with my children. I think her husband may have died. There was a dream where she, was screaming on the bathroom floor, clutching a t-shirt and smelling it. I felt so blue for a couple weeks after that, and I never saw her husband again. Her husband was tall and skinny with long hair, blue eyes, and a big nose. My husband is tall and big-boned with short hair, blue eyes, and a big nose. All 4 men I have dated in my life have been tall, blue-eyed, and have big noses, which I find so attractive. But I like a bit of chubbiness or bigness to men. We took a vacation to Los Angeles once, and I was so overwhelmed with déjà vu that I got my first and only migraine headache. I think we drove past her street because I felt so nauseous and I needed to turn down it, like it was home. I didn't, of course. This was a family vacation. Every so often I would get this déjà vu as a child, or dream of playing and being in a different place. I think I was dreaming of her. The strangest and most unsettling dream was when she was just staring in her bathroom mirror. Then I realized she was staring at me. Then she realized that I realized. and said, "Who are you?" I woke up with a start, and I am guessing somewhere she did too. So what do you think? Am I a glitchy person? Am I not supposed to know these things before they happen? Am I not supposed to know about her? Is this some undiagnosed mental illness? Is there another timeline where I am a widow with an only child? I am ready to finally face this and figure out what this is. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Glitch in the Matrix Stories, episode 39. Big thanks to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. And I finally used that last story there, that's the one I recorded a few weeks ago, but I wanted to give the world a bit of time because of all the kind of dark things that have been happening recently before I used it. So that's that story I was talking about. Okay, I'm going to make this just a short outro for this video. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.